So, when I ask, what is Odoo? What comes to mind? Well, Odoo is a bit of everything. Odoo is a suite of business management software that some people say is like fertilizer because of the way it promotes growth. But some people also say Odoo is like a magic beanstalk because it grows with your company and is also magically affordable. But then again, you could look at Odoo in terms of how its individual software programs are a lot like building blocks. I mean, whatever your business needs, manufacturing, accounting, HR programs, you can build a custom software suite that's perfect for your company. So, what is Odoo? Well, I guess Odoo is a bit of everything. Odoo is a fertilizer, magic beanstalk building blocks for business. Yeah, that's it. Which means that Odoo is exactly what every business needs. Learn more and sign up now at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
Hey everyone, I'm your host Peter Zablocki, and you're listening to History Shorts. I hope everyone's having a great day so far, and thank you for making this show a small part of that. If you'd like to help me out with a small gesture, please leave History Shorts a rating or a review, and click that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. For sources and books used as the basis for these episodes, how to advertise on a show, and other information such as a list of our upcoming guests on the Conversation series, or a link to our Patreon account where you can find exclusive episodes not heard here, please visit www.historyshortspodcast.com. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate podcast listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now and take your podcast experience to the next level. Having said all of that, when Maria Eva Duarte de Perón died on July 26, 1952, at just 33 years old, all of Argentina wept. Known to the people as Evita, she had risen from illegitimacy and poverty to become the First Lady of the nation, the spiritual leader of the working class, and a living saint to millions. Her funeral was a spectacle unlike any the country had seen. Millions flooded the streets of Buenos Aires. Men sobbed openly. Women fainted from grief. Factories shut down. Radio station played only funeral music. To many Argentinians, especially the poor and disenfranchised, Evita had not died. She had ascended. But what followed was one of the strangest and most macabre sagas in the history of modern politics. The mystery of Evita's corpse. Here is the rest of that story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941,
it's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Shortly after Evita died of cervical cancer, her husband, President Juan Domingo Perón, ordered her body to be embalmed. Not in a standard sense, but in a way that would allow it to be displayed permanently, preserved forever. He wanted her to lie in state like Lenin in Moscow. She would remain frozen in time, beautiful and incorruptible, a secular saint for the people. To do this, Perón turned to Dr. Pedro Ara, a Spanish pathologist and embalming specialist known for his meticulous, almost artistic preservation techniques. Ara agreed and began a process that would take months. Working in secret at the CGT labor union headquarters in Buenos Aires, Ara removed blood and bodily fluids, replacing them with a chemical cocktail that hardened the tissues without discoloring them. Evita's body was filled with wax and alcohol-based preservatives. Her skin was so perfectly preserved that Ara reportedly left a small incision on her back open so that he could prove years later that the body was not a wax replica. But the result was more than a medical marvel. It was uncanny. Evita, now encased in glass, looked serene, radiant, you might say, like she had simply fallen asleep in her white dress. A veil covered her eyes. A faint smile touched her lips. Her fingernails were manicured. Her hair was styled just so. Ara called her corpse his masterpiece, and many who saw it described the sight as both holy and unsettling. Plans were made for a grand mausoleum, a monument that would dwarf anything in South America, where the people could pay homage to her forever. But the mausoleum was never built. In 1955, 3 years after Evita's death, Juan Perón was overthrown in a military coup. The new leaders, deeply anti-Perón and fearful of Evita's lingering power, banned all things related to the Perons. Even speaking her name in public was forbidden. Her portraits were burned, her name scrubbed from textbooks. But the generals that took over the government faced a unique dilemma: what to do with her body. Evita's embalmed corpse was still in Buenos Aires, hidden in the CGT building. To the military, it was a powder keg, a potential rallying point for Perón's loyalists. Crowds might flock to it. It might inspire uprisings. So the solution was to make it vanish. In 1956, under the cover of night, the military seized the corpse. What followed was a decade-long saga of secrecy, deception, and desecration. For security reasons, the body was moved multiple times, from military bases to attics to police headquarters. Soldiers who guarded or transported the body sometimes suffered bizarre fates: breakdowns, accidents, even suicides. Rumors spread that the body was cursed. Others believed it wept or bled. One soldier, overwhelmed by guilt, reportedly built a small altar beside the casket and prayed to Evita for forgiveness. Another was driven to madness, convinced the body was haunting him. The military, paranoid and unsure what to do, eventually shipped the body out of the country. In 1957, Evita's corpse was smuggled to Italy under a false identity. It was buried under the name Maria Maggi de Magistris in a cemetery in Milan. A plain gravestone marked the spot. No one outside of a tight circle of military insiders knew where she was. For the next 14 years, Evita lay in a foreign grave in Italy, entombed not as a saint or martyr, but as an anonymous Italian housewife. Meanwhile, Juan Perón drifted through exile, first in Paraguay, then Panama, then Venezuela, and finally Spain. His power waned, but the myth of Evita only grew. Underground Perón supporters revered her memory. Plays and songs were whispered into existence. Even those who had never seen her alive knew her as a symbol of social justice, passion, and tragedy. Then in 1971, the political winds shifted again. Argentina, under pressure from Perón loyalists and eager to reconcile with its past, reached out to Perón, who was then living in Madrid with his third wife, Isabel. In a quiet diplomatic arrangement, the military returned Evita's body to her husband. After 16 years in hiding, the corpse was exhumed and flown to Spain. When Juan Perón saw his wife's face again, all that were there said he could not stop crying. But the body had changed. Time, humidity, and mishandling had taken a toll. One of Evita's fingers was apparently missing. There were cracks in her face and hands, and her feet had decayed. But remarkably, the preservation still mostly held. Ara's embalming had worked. Evita's features were intact. She was still unmistakably Evita. In Madrid, Perón and Isabel built a shrine to her in their home. The coffin was kept in a private room, sometimes lit by candles and adorned with flowers. Isabel, deeply mystical, would reportedly brush the corpse's hair and even sleep beside it, claiming to channel Evita's spirit. To some, it was a gesture of love. To others, it was an unsettling obsession. But Perón was aging, and the pull of Argentina remained strong. In 1973, he returned home, older and diminished, but still a symbol of a bygone era. He was re-elected president in a stunning political comeback. A man who had once ruled during fascism, now leading a fractured democracy. Isabel became vice president, as odd as that sounds. But less than a year later, Juan Perón died of a heart attack. Isabel succeeded him, becoming the world's first female president. And with Perón gone, Evita's body returned once more to Argentina. In 1974, President Isabel Perón arranged for the repatriation of Evita's remains. For the first time since her death, Evita was brought back to Buenos Aires, not in secrecy, but with a ceremony. Her body was reunited with Juan Perón's, and they were both displayed briefly in the presidential palace before plans were made to bury them together. But Argentina was entering a new age of darkness. Just 2 years later, Isabel was overthrown in a military coup, plunging the country into the Dirty War, a period of political terror, torture, and mass disappearances. The new military government had no interest in glorifying the Peróns. Evita's body was quietly removed from public view once more. Finally, in the late 1970s, her remains were placed in the Duarte family tomb in the Recoleta Cemetery, one of the most secure mausoleums in the world. Set deep within layers of steel and concrete, behind iron gates and surrounded by family, Evita's body was entombed at last. She had been dead by then for over 25 years. She had been embalmed, worshipped, kidnapped, exiled, buried under a false name, shipped across oceans, placed in private shrines, and ultimately interred in a mausoleum built like a fortress for her family. In life, she had inspired devotion. In death, she became a myth. Today, visitors still leave flowers at her grave in Recoleta. Her legacy remains divisive in Argentina. To some, she was a manipulative populist. To others, she was a champion of the poor, the mother of the nation, the flame of Perón's. But few deny the power of her story, or the eerie journey of her body. Thanks for listening. This week on the Conversation series, Scott Allen Ellsworth, an acclaimed American historian and New York Times best-selling author.
Discovering that the version of John Wilkes Booth that we were all taught is wrong. So the version that I was taught, and you probably were too, was that Booth was this sort of second-rate actor who was second-class actor living in the shadow of his far more famous father and brother, both actors. You know, kind of a loner, a loser, kind of an archetype for a John Hinckley. Booth wasn't second-rate. He was a superstar of the American stage. And that was sort of the first clue that maybe part of our story was wrong. And questions of Booth's connections with the Confederate Secret Service. And once I sort of had that breakthrough, I realized we've got a bigger story here.